Hello, everyone. Today I'm with songwriter and composer Scott Richardson. How are you doing today, Scott?
I am doing good.
That's
Very
good.
well.
It's good that you are doing well,
Well, indeed.
as opposed to not doing well. So, Scott, we have collaborated on a couple projects before, and I wanted to meet with you and talk with you a little bit more about your work and your creative process, as well as a little bit about your short film, The Benny Case, which you wrote and co-directed. So, yeah, I just wanted to start out by asking you, or not asking you so much as, tell me a little bit about yourself, your childhood, what kind of led you to the path you're on now as far as
Sure.
pursuing music.
I would say the beginning started in high school when I started playing guitar. And it was just like a hobby, which I really enjoyed, like kind of like a de-stressor, because I was into basketball.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I would get home from practice and just play guitar to de-stress. And then in college, I started playing in jazz bands and started taking music a little more seriously. And at the same time as I started doing that, I just started writing songs entirely for myself. I honestly don't really know what kind of inspired me to start writing songs because I'd never written poetry or any kind of creative writing
Yeah.
before either. I think part of it was just I started becoming a little more confident in singing, and I was very apprehensive against singing.
Oh, yeah.
As a kid, I was the guy who was mouthing the words in church. And then in college, I was like, you know what? No one can hear me. It's me alone in my room. I'm
Yeah.
gonna sing.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of gave me the freedom to just try and explore a little bit more creative writing.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a lot of songs just for myself. And then in college, I started doing a few open mics and just sharing some of the things that I'd written. And that gave me enough confidence to actually start recording.
Yeah.
So I guess in spring of 2021, I released my first EP. And at the same time, everything happened in like a year or two.
Yeah.
But during that same time, I started writing film music. I started mostly with our mutual friend Josh Ryan, who asked me to do a few like small bits of music for a few scenes, and that kind of progressed into doing whole short films. And so that's something I've also been doing on the side for a while now. And now I'm still recording and still writing. I just released an EP, and right now I'm currently working on a short film with Josh Ryan, which is probably the most ambitious film scoring project I've done. It's very orchestral in nature, so it's definitely challenging me a lot since I come from the songwriter side of things, not really the classically trained arranger and composer side of things. So so that's how I got here.
Well, that's fun. So when did you actually pick up the guitar and start learning it? Was that something you did from a young age, or was it in high school?
I was 13, I think.
Okay.
I actually started with the bass guitar.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what our family band needed. We had a family band with my dad, and we played for like John's drum rehearsal, drum recital.
Yeah.
And then I transitioned to guitar because I found the beauty of turning an amp up to 10 and dialing up the distortion. And so, yeah, I started more like the rock kind of genre. And it wasn't until I think like senior of high school where I found like jazz and blues and more of the, I don't know, classy genres. I don't know.
So you do a bit of piano now. Did you start that in high school as you were pursuing these other genres, or is that something you learned young?
That's kind of interesting. I learned piano when I was like 7, and I took like 2 or 3 years of lessons, and I think I got pretty good, and I really, in some ways, enjoyed it. But then I quit because I was just like kind of fed up with like the classically trained aspect of things. I
Yeah.
didn't want to learn this piece of music.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater and just quit piano.
Yeah.
And then when I started writing songs, that's when I picked up piano again.
Okay.
Kind of from scratch. Like I did
yeah.
not remember anything. I mean, as a kid, I learned to read music and I completely forgot it. So just a lot of ear training.
Yeah.
A lot of YouTube. A lot of yeah.
That's fun. So at what point did it kind of click for you that music was something you wanted to pursue when you were, started writing music? What point did it kind of go, this is something I'd like to pursue as like an actual career?
When I started sharing what I made with people and when I got to see the effect that it can have. Music has this way of, obviously it makes you feel things, but what made me want to, start pursuing this as a career was the fact that I can share truth and get people to understand it through emotion.
Yeah.
And so in college, when I started doing some open mics and sharing my songs, I was like, oh, this is actually positively affecting this person. This has value other than just making me feel good.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, okay, I think this is worth it. I think this is something which can honor God through it as well. So
that's neat. What before then? Was there anything you were actively pursuing career-wise before then? Before you realized music was your calling?
Oh, well, I was a business major and graduated a business major. I explored a lot of different things and researched a lot of different careers, and none of them really stuck, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it was one of those situations where I tried things and found out what I didn't want to do as opposed to really what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until music that I realized, oh, this is something that I really want to do.
Yeah.
So to more directly answer your question, honestly, not really. I was just trying different things until something stuck. Yeah. It wasn't like one career failed and I had to shift gears.
Yeah.
It was like I was looking for something that I actually wanted to do.
Yeah. And I think that's good that you were able to figure it out with a little bit of, trial and error, because there is definitely is a pressure now to kind of have it figured out immediately. It's like, well, do you though? Because there's time.
Yeah, no, in college, everyone, kind of expects you to have figured it out. It's like no one has it figured out.
True. So when it comes to music, where do you find inspiration to create music? When it comes to specifically songwriting, I'd say, like, what kind of inspires you?
I approach songwriting definitely from like a storyteller perspective. And what inspires me is story. And while, I would say musical virtuosity like does inspire me, what inspires me more so is hearing a really good story. Which is why I love film so much and why I love doing film scoring, because I get to, more directly approach it from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah.
So I try and do that as much as possible with my songs, as I want to tell a story. And so as far as where inspiration comes, I mean, it's anything, any story. I get very inspired by movies. I get very inspired by the Bible, the Psalms, and a lot of the more poetic material in the Bible.
Yeah.
Sometimes I read it and I'm like, that's a story. That's a song right there that I want to share. So it comes from everywhere. I would say good stories is probably the best source of inspiration for me.
That's neat. So who would be some of your biggest inspirations when it comes to writing music?
Let's see. Lately, one of the biggest ones has been a singer, arranger, composer, everything, named Cody Fry.
Oh,
Have you heard of him?
My wife likes him a lot actually.
Okay, because he does what I love is just combine the orchestra with songwriting,
Mm.
and it's a very unique thing to do. And he does it all himself, and so that's very inspiring to me because I do most of my stuff myself when I need a musician for something I don't play, and then I ask them to play. But the composing and arranging aspect of things, like I've studied a lot of what he does to figure out how do you do this all by yourself. And so he's been a great source of inspiration. He's incredibly talented. Like I don't even come close to his level of just virtuosity in so many different things. I would say, there's so many. When I first started writing songs, Bruno Major was a major influence. He's a little less known, but he has like a jazz-inspired R&B sound. And I think he was a big inspiration for how I wanted to record songs. A lot of electronic drums as opposed to recording a real set.
Yeah.
And just the jazz influence. I was just like, yes, somebody's making jazz-inspired songs that people like.
Yeah.
I want to do that. Oh gosh, Fernando Ortega. Do you know who he is?
I don't think I've heard of him.
He's a Christian songwriter, and he makes some of the most truly worshipful songs that I've heard. And that's another aspect of my songwriting, which I want to do, at least for the songs that I make, which are more hymn-like, is I want them to be truly worshipful. And he does an amazing job of creating beautiful melodies and awesome arrangements, but they're not distracting from the message. He has this amazing balance of making a beautiful song that only serves to bolster the truth that's being told, as opposed to drawing attention to the artist itself and saying, look how good this guy is at music. It's more, look at this beautiful thing that God has allowed me to do. And so he's another source of inspiration, especially on the last project I did.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I'll have to check him out for sure. So when it comes to writing music, I think not music, but anyone who's pursuing art, everyone likes to try and do something that kind of sets them apart, maybe not consciously. Is there anything you do when writing music to try and kind of set yourself apart from other musicians?
That's a good question. I love that question. I think about this a lot, and I try not to, honestly, as much as I do, because it can turn into this idol. But I try to be genuine. I think that's one of the biggest things is, and practically what that kind of looks like is I try to write songs that fit my voice.
Yeah.
That generally sound like I'm more having a conversation as opposed to showing off musical ability.
Yeah.
I think that's something which I try and stress a lot to keep my music grounded. And to keep the story the biggest thing as opposed to my voice or my guitar playing or whatnot. Another thing which I'm trying more and more is to incorporate more classically inspired instrumentation. I really, really want to work with an orchestra one day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I really want to record a song with a real orchestra. That's one of my biggest musical dreams.
Yeah.
That'd just be so much fun. And so I want to incorporate those elements, and hopefully that will create something more unique. And I would say one more thing, which I'm really trying to do, which may or may not give me a unique sound, is making songs that deal with Christian topics, which talk about the word in depth, which, again, with the Fernando Ortega example, which are truly worshipful, and which also get into really deeper elements of the Christian faith.
Yeah.
I really want to make songs that the church can enjoy. And I think like my music kind of right now is like split down the middle, where like half of it is kind of explicitly Christian music that the church would love, and half of it's just like anyone. I mean, songs about anything. And so I want to pursue that in an attempt to maybe offer a unique sound, which can be an encouragement to both the church and to those who don't call themselves Christians.
Yeah. So what does your creative process look like when you write a song, as well as what does it look like when you're doing, scoring for a film? Are they similar? Are they vastly different?
Oh, songwriting is more natural. Songwriting, I just sit down with a primary instrument. Maybe I have lyrics already, maybe I don't. And I'm just going wherever the song wants me to go. And that's the freedom of songwriting, is you're creating the story.
Yeah.
The creative process with film scoring is you have a guideline. You have a trail map, which you have to follow, because you are essentially acting for the actors. You are putting in music that either correctly or incorrectly, displays the emotion that you want. So I can't go wherever I want to go. Where with songwriting, I can add a bridge that's wacky and which conveys a new weird emotion. I can't do that with film scoring. I need to stick to what's actually on screen. So the creative process with film scoring is it's more collaborative with the director. What I really appreciate about working with you and with Josh and other directors that I've worked with is that I've gotten to have lots of exchanges about like what you want for this moment, and that's the creative process of film scoring. Is I'm fulfilling someone else's vision.
Yeah,
I'm still kind of infusing my own vision there too, but it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
So I'm limited by what the director wants. I can't just make music for the sake of making music.
Yeah.
So with film scoring, I mean, honestly, that starts with the primary instrument too. Like usually the piano. It's a little easier for me to write with piano than guitar. And I'll just noodle away and kind of just find the heart of whatever I'm making before I get into arranging.
Okay.
Because if I just start writing, I'll probably make something pretty good, but it might not fit the soul of what I'm what I'm making. So I need to find that first. And then after that, then it's just work. Then you're just plugging away. Yeah.
Do you find that, like, especially with creating melodies, it's something that comes to you naturally, or is it something you have to kind of sit there for hours on end trying different things?
Oh, well, some melodies come just naturally. Like I've been at work and had a melody come to mind, and I quickly whistle it into my phone because I'm like, oh, that's a cool melody. I want to hold on to that. But there's also the more like kind of academic approach which I have taken, especially with what I'm working on right now, is I am thinking in terms of scales and modes to try and find a melody within that, because I know that mode will give me mystery, or I know that mode will give me sadness. And so I'm trying to find melodies within that scale. So I think with songwriting, it's a much more natural process of finding the melody. And then with film scoring, it's a little more, I'm thinking more about theory.
Okay.
I'm making decisions a little bit more about like what I know in my head as opposed to what I feel in my heart, which maybe that's not a good thing, but like, it saves time because I know like this scale will sound mysterious, and so I can use it. So yeah, you do have to find the heart, through that scale or whatnot. But yeah, finding melodies with film scoring is I found it so far a little more academic.
Okay.
A little more just relying on theory a little bit. Yeah.
What's worked before?
Yes.
That definitely makes sense. When it comes to songwriting, especially, how many ideas slash drafts do you find yourself going through before landing on the final product?
Ooh. It does depend on the song, but I rarely like do like drafts of things,
Mm-hmm.
and that I really try and get as much writing done in the moment
Mm-hmm.
and try as hard as possible to get a finished product before I like am done writing.
Mm,
So if I
okay.
have an idea, like maybe just the first verse of a song,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, okay, that's worth investing time, I'll try and finish that song before I leave that writing session.
Okay.
Just because it's really important to me that the original like heart of the song is like maintained throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then it's not one of those situations where you develop a really good verse with a really beautiful melody, and then you come back to it later and you can't really find that emotion again.
Mm-hmm.
And so you add a chorus or a bridge, which may be good, but it doesn't really feel like it's marrying well
Yeah.
with the verse. So I try not to, bounce around a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
The exception being when I get stuck, which does happen a lot. I have about like 3 or 4 songs right now, which I love so much,
Yeah.
but they don't have endings.
Mm.
And for me personally, the ending of a song is so important to me.
Yeah.
I hate when songs kind of just fade out, or when a song is kind of doesn't have a climax. Again, storytelling. I
Yeah.
want that third act climax
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a song as opposed to just repeating the same form 3 or 4 times and the song's over. And so there's this one song in particular that I have right now, which I've been trying to find that ending verse or something like that, and I just can't. And so that's why I like to do it all at once,
Yeah, yeah.
because this happens to me. I write a really great song 75% of the way, and then I can't finish it.
It's just gone.
Yeah, it's just gone.
Huh. So, would you say finding the ending is the biggest challenge you have when writing music, or would you say there's another challenge that kind of trumps you every time?
Um, I hesitantly say yes. It's probably the biggest challenge because sometimes it's hard to make an ending feel genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of my favorite songs that I've written were songs where I started with the ending and I knew where I wanted to go.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the rest of the songwriting was just writing about the journey up until that point.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yes, if I have the beginning of a song and I'm not sure where it's going, that is a big challenge. Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to the talking about the Benny case a little bit now.
Yes.
So you've told me a little bit about it before, but just to reiterate it again, where did inspiration for it come from?
Directly, I'm not exactly sure because I wrote, quote unquote, wrote it in my car as I was driving back to school.
Yeah.
So I had like a 4-hour drive to just think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say it is loosely inspired by the writing of Aaron Sorkin, who's a screenwriter. He wrote The Social Network and Moneyball and a lot of like movies with very snappy, witty dialogue. And then, but I think the biggest source of inspiration was a scene from the movie Zodiac. Have you seen that film?
No.
It's about the Zodiac murderer, and there's a scene in that movie of interrogation.
Okay.
Or no, an investigation.
Okay.
And that when I saw that scene, I just loved the way it was shot and the mood that it was capturing. And I was like, I think I can tell that story, but differently in a way that feels original.
Yeah.
But also is definitely inspired by that. I'll send it to you. It's a really great scene.
Okay.
But yeah, I planned out as much as I could in my car. I had a lot of lines that just were just coming to me, and I was just like out loud just saying the conversation, saying, "Oh, does this have a flow or not?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I recorded as much as I could on my phone, and then when I got to school, I went straight to the library and just wrote out like 95% of it, and then later I made some adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah, and then when me and Josh decided to co-direct it together, we made a few more adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you went to actually write it, it flowed pretty freely, you found? Like there wasn't a lot of hesitation, or did you still have to kind of like fill in gaps anywhere?
Well, I had like the first half.
Okay.
And so for the most part, I think it was pretty unchanged. I just kind of wrote down what I'd recorded on my phone. And then I didn't really have a plan exactly for how I wanted it to end. Again, endings. And I just figured that out there, and I figured out that I wanted it to end, spoilers, with it being revealed that he was involved with the crime. And I knew I wanted a more unresolved kind of ending where you don't necessarily get to see the motions fully play out at the end. Partly because I wasn't sure if I wanted to like readdress it later and maybe come up with like what happens afterwards kind of story. But that was all figured out in the library.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as inspiration goes, you mentioned a couple scenes in a screenwriter that you kind of look to. Were there any other inspirations you used for, especially when you went to go to film it itself, that you looked for?
I took screenshots of that scene from Zodiac, and one of them in particular, I did want to use in the film because it's a center frame shot of the investigators, which is so it's unnerving to look at because like everything's 2/3, and then suddenly you get this center frame shot of the investigator looking directly into the camera, and that kind of the way of shooting that so that you can see the internal process of the investigators, like, okay, something's not quite right here.
Yeah.
I really wanted to express that as much as possible. I think just a lot of any conversation scene really inspired it.
Yeah.
I think the interrogation between Batman and Joker.
Yeah, classic.
That's always a great source of inspiration for these kinds of scenes. Yeah, so it was just random scenes kind of inspired it, and I wanted to I kind of want to do this myself. I want to see if I can do it.
Yeah,
because one of my favorite things about movies is conversation scenes where you have, a wide, a close, and maybe a super close, and like that's all you have.
Yeah,
and just being able to put all that pressure on the writing to be good, because when you have there's no fanfare. There's no visual attraction about it. Like you try to make the shots as beautiful as possible, but if the writing's not good, the scene just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted that kind of challenge. And it was all in my head too. I wasn't even planning on making this into a film. I was just like, you know what? This is a really fun idea, and I'm gonna roll with it.
Just gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you did because I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was I was telling you beforehand. I think the dialogue is very good and. Yeah, it's like I said, the dialogue carries the story very well, and it's just very entertaining to watch.
Thank you.
What was the biggest challenge you faced in the whole process of just creating it?
We had a lot of new equipment that we'd never used before on that shoot.
Yeah.
And it was a new camera. It was new microphone. I think we were working with actual lights for the first time. And so figuring out all that was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that was for me and Josh, that was probably the biggest challenge. For me personally, it was just directing. I'd never done that before.
Yeah.
And just taking that extra initiative to make sure all the actors feel comfortable, that they understand their characters, that all their questions are answered. That was probably the biggest challenge for me. Because I'd always been Josh's DP. I'd never actually directed.
Yeah.
which was very freeing. I was like, oh, I get to make decisions. I'm not just pointing the camera now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm affecting the story from a narrative perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, just being a first-time director was the biggest challenge, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say was the biggest thing you learned from the overall process?
Kind of what I mentioned before, that writing is paramount.
Mm.
I mean, it's from the same perspective I have with songwriting too. Like, I think you should be able to just read the writing, whether it's a screenplay or a song lyrics, and be moved by them.
Yeah.
With almost as much, with as much power as if you were watching it.
Mm.
If you're watching it being filmed. And so I think that is one of the biggest things I learned about the Benny case, because it was so contained and because there wasn't a lot there to kind of, there's no exploding cars. There's no, there's no visual attraction.
Yeah.
It was like, can you make the audience care for the characters and be interested in what happens to them?
Yeah.
So that was definitely the biggest thing I learned. Also, that filmmaking is a lot of work. Because previously I just shown up with my camera, done some prep, of course.
Yeah.
But then when the shoot is over, I'm kind of done.
Yeah.
Except for when Josh needs music. So now I had to do the sound design.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just like a lot of things which I hadn't had to do before.
Yeah.
So.
At this point, do you think you'll ever write another script? Do you have any plans to, or are you open to the idea of it?
I am, if I have a story to tell. I haven't tried since.
Yeah.
Benny Case to this day is the only script I've ever written. And, well, I've had a few ideas. I had this one idea for like a feature-length film that I was like brainstorming a little bit, that it's still in its infant stages. But I still haven't written any scripts since then. But definitely, that was a very rewarding process. I'm so thankful that it actually worked and that people liked it.
Yeah.
And so I'm encouraged enough to say, if I find another story, then yeah, absolutely.
Very nice. So going back just a teensy bit, when it came to doing the Benny case, how much did you find that the final product how much did you find that it actually ended up matching your initial vision?
That's a great question. Some things were exactly what I wanted. Some things were not. I think what the actors in particular did so well was understand the snappy tempo of the conversation that I wanted, and they did such a good job with that, and that's definitely was a highlight for me of like matching the vision that I had. Visually, again, we were working with new equipment, and so there's a lot of things I wish I could have done better. I would have liked if the cinematography was a little more unnerving. A little more, makes people squirm a little bit in their seats. Like something's just not right.
Yeah.
And I wish I could have expressed that visually a little bit better. Whether it was lighting or framing or whatnot. But like some of the images didn't quite match what was in my head.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the experience and knowledge to know, like, how do I get there?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how these filmmakers that I look up to actually get that look.
Yeah.
And so I just did my best. But I'm very proud of what it turned out to be, and very grateful to everyone who helped out, and to Josh for bringing his expertise into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as writing the script for the Benny case, or writing your own songs, or composing, what would you say to date you feel like has been the most challenging project you've taken on?
Oh my goodness. There's so many different ways I could approach this question. Can I give two answers?
Sure. You have my blessing.
Okay. From a songwriting perspective, my EP Heartmender was the hardest thing I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Not really because the music was hard to write
Mm-hmm.
or particularly complicated anyway, but because my source material was the Bible.
Yeah.
And I was so anxious and in prayer that I would honor the source material, that everything that I wrote would actually be true.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time like reviewing the songs with men of faith or respect who really know their Bibles, to make sure that everything that I was writing was not just emotionally convicting and captivating, but that it was also just true.
Yeah.
And so I think lyrically that stretched me so much. Of everything I've ever written, whether it be film or music or whatever, that's the most rewriting I've done.
Yeah.
Trying to make every word as true as possible. And sometimes, this is something really interesting about songwriting I've been thinking lately, is sometimes it is better to use a word which is more true than a word that rhymes better or fits your meter better. Because I think sometimes in songwriting you can compromise what is true for a word that either feels better or rhymes better, as opposed to doing what is actually accurate according to what you're trying to express.
Yeah.
Again, getting back to, can you read this? And it is captivating and true. So that was really challenging. But musically, are you ready for this, James?
I'm ready.
Was 480 seconds.
Oh, really?
that for listeners, that's a film that James directed and which I wrote the music for. That was a challenge because it's like a 12-minute film, right? And music is playing the entire time, and it's this slow, gradual build of intensity, and that was hard.
Yeah.
Like, it makes me respect like Hans Zimmer so much because he did that for like a 90-minute film in Dunkirk, and he accomplished that over 90 minutes, and I was struggling so hard with 12 minutes. So that was a hard project. It wasn't necessarily like a super time-consuming project.
Yeah.
It was more just, I didn't know where to start. I was just like, how do I make this gradual build of intensity? Because it felt so unmusical. Because I wasn't writing melodies or anything.
Yeah.
I was creating this sound design that could carry a film for 12 minutes. So that was challenging, and I'm really grateful for that project because it pushed me, and I got to learn a lot, which I would never have like thought to like try and figure out how to do some of the things I did on that film without a project like that. Like no one tries to.
Yeah.
I think we talked about shepherd tones, and I never actually figured it
Figured it
out.
out.
But I spent like an hour or two just like researching it, trying to figure it out. But I think that's kind of the beauty of like taking on a project that's someone else's vision, is it pushes you.
Yeah.
And that one definitely challenged me.
Gotcha. Well, I think you did an amazing job of that. I listened to the music a lot after like you sent over the first couple drafts. I'm like, this is really good. Actually, I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it served the film very well, and I'm very pleased with what you did there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely wish I could have done a bit more as far as like advertising what you did in it. Like, go check this guy out, just because it was so good.
Get my credits.
Definitely have to consider that in the future, whether I work with you or other composers. Just being sure to make it the composers themselves more accessible, so people can check them out. So, where do you see yourself going in the future with this? What are your long-term visions and plans?
I want to keep making music, which tells stories and which glorifies God. at the moment, I'm kind of like doing two musical careers right now. I'm doing the songwriting. I'm also doing the film scoring. And both of them are like driving along parallel to each other, and neither one is budging. And so I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do. If I want to like break off and like pursue one more than the other. So I'm kind of just doing both until maybe some big project comes along which requires me to shelf one and really devote to the other. So I'm just gonna keep on riding both of those paths and see what happens. Yeah,
and maybe they'll merge. You'll be Randy Newman or something.
Oh yes. Okay. No. I just totally forgot about him. Back to inspiration. Randy Newman, like not just because you said it, like legitimately, he is one of my biggest inspirations.
Oh, that's neat.
As a songwriter and a composer, because he is, again, like talking about like conversation in singing. I don't think anyone listens to Randy Newman and says, "Oh, what a beautiful voice." It's like, you got a friend in me. But they're so drawn to the story that he's telling.
Yeah.
He makes such beautiful melodies, and they're so nostalgic and timeless.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what I want to create is, like, who knows who wrote Somewhere Over the Rainbow? Like, I do. But, like, I don't know too many people who could actually name who wrote that song. But the song is timeless.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do, is create songs that, like, it doesn't matter about who wrote it or who sang it. The song itself is a piece of history.
Yeah.
And I think Randy Newman does such a good job of that. So
definitely. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Scott. For anyone listening, you can find Scott's work on Spotify if you are interested in checking him out. I would highly recommend it. I certainly think he's a blooming star, and I think anyone would be privileged to hearing his stuff starting in the early days, because it's good, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing, as he learns and as he grows, how it will become even better and better, especially when the bar is already so high. So once again, Scott, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate having this conversation with you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. This was very fun.
Thank you.